Are you ready? He's ready.
He's ready? Hello, and now I'd like to open the meeting of December 14th of the Charter Commission. I believe it's our third meeting. It's 7:05, and we have a stated close-up time of around 9. So we may be juggling the agenda just a little bit as we go along in order to get everything in. But you all have been very, very flexible, very patient, and all those other good words, and so I think that we'll manage to get through things tonight. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome to the table an old friend, a very old friend. That doesn't mean that you're old, it means I'm old. All right, a friend from many years ago. And yeah, take a little water in case you need it. And as you know, Roger Phillips is, well, he described himself as the lame duck clerk. And I guess that's so for another few days. But we wanted to catch him before he got away. I don't know exactly where he'd be headed, but we needed to catch him. And he has agreed to come in tonight. And who knows anything more about this charter? It would be hard to say. He, I'm sure, will be giving us recommendations, suggestions, clarifications, and maybe a little good old-fashioned advice. So we will accept all of the other with gracious thanks.
Well,
You're up.
thanks, Madam Chair. And thank all of you for being willing to serve on the commission. It's one of those unpaid duties that we're, and civic commitments that I appreciate those folks who are willing to do it to exercise, so I appreciate your service and involvement. I don't have any prepared remarks as such. I just thought I'd talk a little bit about my experience as clerk for just a few years, and and how well it worked, how well the system worked under the old charter, and my experience under the new charter. Maybe just a few words about the duties of clerk. First and foremost, we handle the elections. So that's an easy one. And that process usually starts in August before the November election, so that we can get notices out and get declarations of candidacies prepared and those types of things. And as you know, what we've tried to do and have by resolution of this board, we hold our elections in conjunction with the municipal elections of the city of Concord, except for those years in which there's a national election and the city doesn't hold an election, but the Concord School District, by statute, is able to. I would really be remiss if I did not mention the great cooperation we've always had with the city clerk of Concord. And because it takes a good deal of coordination to get ballots ready.
Can you move your
to get ballots ready and to make certain that the proper ballots get to each ward and that all of the ward officials are properly trained. And really, over all of the 36 years or so that I've been clerk, there's only been one incident I can think of where there was a little hiccup, where a few ballots in Ward 1 were given to voters who weren't in the Concord School District. It didn't amount to very much and wouldn't have any effect on the election, but it shows me at least, how important it is to make certain that all the ward officials are properly trained, because now we have not only in Ward 1, but also in 2, and I don't know but whether part of Ward 3. now is also in, you know, some of it is in the the Merrimack Valley District, and some, of course, in the Concord School District. The other, so elections are probably the most time-consuming of the duties of clerk. But the other responsibilities center around to make sure that we're available, to make certain that we can certify votes of the Board of Education, so that we can meet state regulations with the Department of Revenue, and, you know, our tax rate can be set for the city. And also, in those occasions when bonds are issued, the clerk will often have to go through a number of documents to certify. So when we have a clerk for the district, we want to make certain that that clerk is available to attend to those duties. I know there's been comment in the past that maybe $300 a year in compensation isn't sufficient for a clerk. I don't know. I think there are lots of folks that are willing to devote their time, but that's really a policy decision that the school board can make, because it can set the compensation for the clerk. Now, I have to admit that I liked the old system under the previous charter, and that old system was that the clerk and the school district treasurer were appointed by the board. And that happened, and that was in you know, a specific provision within the charter, and that the previous charter, and I think that worked very well. As I understand it, the Attorney General's office thought that once that was no longer in the charter and the new one would be formed by a charter commission, that then we had to abide by all of the school district laws that were in existence that really aren't as applicable to this district, which has a full-time business administrator, and so that often the treasurer wouldn't have the same duties as say, in a smaller district. But that, I think, I'm no municipal law expert, but probably that has to be changed by either legislative action, or if the charter is amended and has a provision that doesn't conflict, that perhaps because of our unique position, it could pass muster with the AG's office. At any rate, the other thing I liked about the old charter was that when more candidates ran for an office, and we determined completely by draw the order on the ballot. And that was often done, as this chair can testify, that we put the names in a hat and draw those names out, and that was the order of the names on the ballot. The legislature has a different system, and the Secretary of State says for whenever there are 2, 3, 4, up to, I don't know, 20 candidates running, they determine who will be the first alphabet. We have to put all the names in alphabetical order and say the 15th name is the one chosen. Then the number 15 under we start off with that letter of the alphabet and complete the alphabet, and then start again with A, and so it's more of an alphabetical system than the complete chance. I just like the idea that everyone has an equal opportunity to be first, but that's just my own opinion, and public policy obviously can differ. And I have to admit that when we adopted this existing charter, I was concerned that we would not have sufficient candidates running on a ward basis, and that there would be really good candidates that were willing to run, but there were just too many people, or on the other side of the coin, there wouldn't be enough in the ward configuration, but there would be plenty in some others. So far, we haven't had a problem. I mean, every time when the elections close, we've had enough candidates to fill all the positions. But I have to admit, if I had my druthers, I like the 3 folks elected to represent the entire district every year, as opposed to the ward basis. But again, I understand there are good policy arguments on the other side to say, gee, it's easier to run an award configuration of only 3 or at most 4 wards, and it's much more difficult to run citywide or district-wide. But from my point of view, you know, a school board member has to represent the interests of all of the students in all of the schools. It's kind of unlike the old system where we had an elementary school in every neighborhood, or almost. But at any rate, those are just my few thoughts. Now, the school district clerk, under a charter amendment, under the existing charter, if there's a proposal to change the charter, does have a few more duties to make certain that things go smoothly. Now, in this one, there was an automatic 10-year review, which I don't think has to be included by any means, but otherwise, the school board can propose that there be a revision of the charter or the adoption of a new charter, or voters can petition, and that, if memory serves me correctly, it's 20% of the folks who voted, no less than 1,000, or I think more than 2,000, can petition to have a charter commission such as this. And under that system, the school district clerk would have a lot more responsibility to do things, to collect the signatures, to rely on the city clerk's office to figure out who really is a voter and is registered to vote within the district and can sign the petition, et cetera. So those are just a few of my thoughts, and I'd welcome any question or any, and I'm happy to address, offer my opinion on any questions that any commission member may have.
Thank you very much. Lyndon, could you ask him? I've got nothing coming out of here. I'm struggling.
You couldn't hear me at all?
No. But that doesn't prevent us from having questions asked of Roger Phillips. So, who's first? Go ahead, Mr. Klein.
First of all, thanks for coming, and thanks for all of your years of service, both on the school board and then as clerk. Do you have statistics on those elections, whether in wards or
Crank it right up. Okay.
Citywide? Here, let me make this a little easier. Do you have statistics as the clerk on those elections on a ward basis and a citywide basis where there's been an uncontested election?
I have statistics. I have information available to get that information. Let me put it that way. I had hoped today I would go into my files and draw, for instance, I was just going to indicate how many people voted in the district this last election. Any time that, I haven't kept a running total of, say, how many times there have been uncontested elections and how many times there have been contested. But that's pretty easy to figure by just looking at the ballot and determining, the number of folks running. And I did have, each ward voting machine produces a tape of all of the votes that were taken, all of the ballots that were cast in the school district election. And I keep all of those tapes, except for this past year, because we didn't have to, at least from my point of view, didn't have to, because I don't have to worry about a percentage of the number of voters because we already have a charter commission. But
citywide, which was relatively unusual prior to that time. So for our purposes, I think it would be interesting to know, to see those statistics about the number of voters within wards before and after citywide. And those instances in which both citywide and ward elections, there have been uncontested elections. Part of the reason, my perception and my memory from the last charter review, for those who favor ward voting was a concern that the school board was dominated by people who came from 3 wards within the city. Everybody had equal opportunity to run for the board if they wanted to from all parts of the city. The other question I had for you, Roger, was whether you have any perspective on the issue of holding city or school board elections in non-national and state election years, in other words, in odd-numbered years.
well,
That's a proposal that has been made.
there's no doubt that the Secretary of State would much prefer that our elections never be at the same time as a national election. On the one hand, there's no doubt that the voter turnout is much greater. On the other hand, there are many times that people do not vote in the school district election during a national, unless they really have an opinion, so that there will be either more blank ballots cast or not cast at all. But
I think what would be helpful for us to know on that, if you have it, is what percentage of voters voted in school board elections in national election years, state election years, and off years? I think the number for this immediate past election is 14% of the voters in Concord voted in this election. So, that's a pretty small percentage of the voters to choose people who are going to have a say over a pretty large percentage of the city's budget. So we can, if it's helpful for you, Roger, let us put a request to you in writing, perhaps for the information that you might have that would be helpful to us.
That would be happy to do that, to the extent that we can certainly dig out that information. I don't think that's difficult to do.
Thanks, really appreciate it.
Yep.
Someone else? questions about the part of this charter that is now obsolete because it had reference only to 10 or 11 years ago, or we just go through and tidy that up ourselves?
Right, I think those, I haven't gone through each part of each word of the charter to see if there are some things that have to be tied up, but that's easily done too. I mean, RSA numbers sometimes change, there are all sorts of things, and there isn't anything that strikes me as that we
can't do.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
We're gonna let him go home and have supper?
And thank him a whole lot for doing it for so
Get
much.
a drink, Roger, you can do that too.
I'll take this. Among my other duties, I'm also a member of the Adult Parole Board.
Oh, you're after us.
And today was a hearing day where hearings were supposed to be over by 1:30. Unfortunately, it was after 4, and I didn't quite have time. I was going to go through and look at some of the statistics, and I apologize. I thought that might be a question, but I just did not have time to get everything out and look at it. But I think if you'd be willing to write a letter and saying this is what we're looking for, we can certainly get that. It would just matter of digging out the records for going back a few years. Fortunately, in this age of computers, now we can scan things and get them in. 30 years ago, some of those records were in cardboard boxes that unfortunately, when a water pipe burst in a storage facility, we lost the original records. But now I think with scanned records, we're able to produce things pretty readily.
Attorney Phillips, 2 quick things. Number one, the last Charter Commission collected a lot of that data on votes for prior to 2010. So a lot may already be in a folder that Lyndon showed me today. So we may just have to update it from 2010 forward.
All right.
And second, let me personally say, you're a model for how citizens in a small community should devote themselves to helping their community and young people and teachers and parents, and I thank you so much for serving as that model.
Well, thank you. I'm going to blame that on my father. Because he said to live in a community, it was important to give back to that community. And here's probably my grandson calling me. So, but, I think that's true. I think that's part of good citizenship, to give of yourself and some time and effort. And
thank you.
It's been a pleasure working with the district. I think we overall we have an excellent school district, and I'm glad the voters of Concord have created a school district that can be fiscally independent.
Well, we thank you really sincerely.
Betty, I just have one quick, short, I think it's going to be a very quick.
Of course.
It'll be a quick question. I don't know if it'll be a quick answer. I think it will. Roger, thoughts on a district assistant clerk? Yay, nay, do we? The reason I ask is excuse me, in a conversation I had with one of our administrators here, it came up that if the clerk wasn't available and there was a bond issue that was timely, and having that assistant, just some quick thoughts on that?
Well, we have a deputy clerk, so on those occasions when a clerk is out of state or can't be reached or whatnot, I believe a deputy clerk can stand in his or her place and succeed in complying with the law. Now, that it's interesting that it may be the Department of Revenue says, hold it, it's only the clerk and not the deputy that clerk can sign that. But I would think when you can't have a person act, that the deputy clerk ought to be able to fill those shoes. At least
Very good, thank you.
Only makes sense to me, but
Well,
Yeah.
yep. And let me add my 2 cents about your dedication to this community and your service, and thank you.
thanks, Tom. All right.
Roger, when we come up for parole.
Fortunately, that's limited in term, so it's a 5-year term. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
okay. The next presentation, the presenter, needs no introduction. He's one of us, Bill Arbinger. He's giving us some materials that he's put together, and he's followed this issue
Thank you.
very carefully. Ever since 2011, when we had the end of the first Charter Commission. And so he's continued to follow this, and I think he's probably been polishing it right up until 6 o'clock tonight, is my guess, because that's the way he does things. As soon as he gets one more piece of information, it's incorporated. And so, the old expression is without further ado, and I'll tell you, my stuff is ado, but now you're here. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Betty Holy, and thanks to the commission for letting me talk about this issue. I'm very sorry to have missed our last meeting. I apologize for my absence, but I did follow it on the recording, and I saw that Mrs. Hoadley said that I would try and serve as a model on an issue that might be presented for consideration. So I'm going to try my best, but I won't live up to, I may get a D, C maybe, I'll be worried.
We'll give you a little leeway.
And I've handed out something just to kind of mark us through. The issue that I'm addressing is on page 2. Should the Concord School District Charter be amended to authorize the elected school board to appoint the district treasurer or district clerk? Currently, we do not appoint, the board does not appoint the treasurer and the clerk. As Mr. Phillips said, they are elected. So I'm going to go through some background on this issue from the last Charter Commission that Roger referred to, state what the problem is, why it arose, offer some ideas on why we are uniquely, I think, in a position to consider moving ahead and trying to get to the point where our charter can be amended to provide for the appointment of a treasurer and a clerk. And then just a couple of concluding thoughts. In doing this, preparing for this, to try and hold up to Mrs. Hoadley's high standards, I updated my recollection of what the law was from 2010. There have been some significant developments, and I'll just point out to you a couple of those things at the end. So next, on page 3, the background. As you know, we've all talked about it. Pre-2010, we had a charter uniquely just for the Concord School District, but it was in state law, in our session laws. In 2010, there arose an effort led principally by leaders of Concord to say, hey, we should control how our charter is changed, not require the state legislature to vote to change it. And from 2010 to 2011, in November to November, our Charter Commission was elected. We recommended changes for the local charter. We got 2 questions approved for placement on the ballot in 2011. Concord voters approved both of them. And then our old state law charter, which was in session law, got repealed because you don't want 2 documents. We repealed the one that was in the state law, and now we just have our own singular standing charter. And remember that, because that matters on this. I wanted to include the slide 4 because it reminded me of the timetable that we're under here. And it's really important to see in this progress that we started with our organizational meeting around the same time as we did this time. We got to an approval of the preliminary report by April. So there were 10 meetings, but you had to do a lot of drafting to get that ready to go to a preliminary report. But that, we were all very happy, 9-0, to adopt that. At that point, under the law, we have to transmit it to 3 state officials, AG, Secretary of State, and Department of Revenue Commissioner. What we got, in the 10 days after we submitted it, was a letter, which is interesting reading for me to remember it again, where they objected to parts of our preliminary report. They said, we don't agree that you have the power to do this. We don't think you can do that. And that started a discussion because there were a couple of really nice lawyers on the commission and there was a pushy one, who was me, who doesn't like to hear an attorney general's office say that they may know the law better than me. But it turns out the Secretary of State was quite a stickler on this. And one of the issues, there were several, but one I'm focused on tonight, said your charter that you've drafted, which we just took most of the rules right from the prior one and moved it over, says that you can appoint a treasurer, the school board can appoint a treasurer and a clerk. Said, you can't do that because under state law, Secretary of State said, this one statute, RSA 671, for school districts, you've got to elect a moderator, a treasurer, and a clerk. The voters do. And I remember my answer was, well, Secretary of State, with due respect, this is the Concord Union School District, which has 100 years of history as a separate and independent chartered entity. And for that time period, the school board gets elected to be representatives of the voters. And that school board, properly elected, appoints key officers from a professional staff to serve as clerk and as treasurer. They stuck on, yes, please.
Is there an opinion of the Attorney General on this?
There is not an official opinion.
Is there a letter?
There is a letter. And in looking back at it, the letter is a little bit unclear. But the bottom line is that timetable shows we were under the gun because the golden goose, the raison d'etre for that group was to take control, put it to the voters, and have the voters take control of that in Concord. Everything else came secondary. So this little detail was something that we said, and I'm looking at my prior colleagues, let's not take this on. Let's just give it up and get to the golden goal, which is to move this thing to the voters. So there was a race that happened right there to get that from that preliminary report, which was very thorough and complete, to a final report. And there was stuff going on. So I wanted to say, that gets, to April, we all are going to have to produce a preliminary report in this, as we talked about in the first meeting. But that doesn't end it. There will be a discussion that will come up probably, depending on some of the provisions we may, as a commission, recommend. If you go to the next page, what I've talked about here, I won't repeat it. We ran into the problem with the AG and the Secretary of State. Take a look at page 6. There's the RSA 671-6. This is the one that says, for school districts, each school district election, each school district which is not a cooperative school district shall elect a school district clerk, moderator, and treasurer, and such optional officers. Again, this particular school district concept is really rooted in the concept of the town I grew up in, Cornish, New Hampshire, which is a town. And as a town, it runs off of a town meeting as the legislative body, right? They have selectmen, but everything in the budget in the school district is approved. That's really what this was about, this statute. Yet, it still stands, pursuant to Bill's comment, as part of a letter that this commission faced last time. So it's something that must be taken into account as we all consider this time. On page 7, and I'm almost done to turn it over to you guys. I believe Concord School District is unique. We're an autonomous local government unit. We're not part of a town. We're part of a city. And a city has a special type of charter structure, and we do too. School districts in cities normally are subject to the legislative body control of a city council, say Manchester. And I mentioned that, I'll touch base on Manchester. But not us. We've had an established tradition for literally 100 years of being independent, fiscally autonomous, and responsible for the affairs of the school district. That is the Concord School Board. In 2010, that law, if everything you read in that bill says Concord is going to have the ability to take its charter from state law, put it as a sovereign, separate standing charter, and put on it a procedure for the local community to change it, and that's good. That's what I think the legislature said. They didn't say, we're going to wipe out 100 years of traditions in your charter for things that your voters don't want to change. They didn't say that, I don't believe. And I think that's an argument that if we were to decide to take this issue up, we would want to have a meeting with the Attorney General and talk about this. We have now in front of us, and you've seen it printed in your materials that Lyndon kindly provided, a charter. We're just like the city of Keene. We're like the city of Concord, city of Manchester. They have a charter. Manchester's charter goes down and says at one point, the school committee or the school board has the mayor as the chairperson and ultimately the city council. We're not mixed, those two charters. There's the city charter and there's our school district charter. We definitely weren't required to have a moderator elected. So when I said to the state officials, really, you're not going to require us to elect a moderator, are you? Moderators serve at town meeting. They make sure that everyone is seated and that the meeting progresses. We don't have that. And you're right. So even though that statute says you got to elect a moderator, they still knew something was not quite right here. And finally, I would say most of section RSA 671 is focused on elections. Like an earlier section of 671 says that you can't hold elections in the national years. You can only hold them in the off years for school districts. That's what it says. But then there's a section in there, there's always been an exception for the Concord School District, express in 671 too. Express exception. And then the legislature saw fit, when we did our work last time, to say, just so we're clear, not only is Concord accepted because of the charter it had in state law, or any successor thereto. The legislature recognized that the charter that was approved by our Concord voters last time, we had one of these, is that that's a successor charter for this governing entity. So, when I look at this, section 671.6 is unique in 671. It's really not focused on elections. It's focused on the form of governance. What officers do you have, and how are those officers elected? And really, charters and municipal governance law are what should apply, not 671. This is my own thing. So if you turn to, I'll conclude in the last two slides with saying that this presentation to set the table for this commission to discuss this issue. What do we think? Do we want to follow it or pursue it? I think one thing I would offer up for the discussion is to consider meeting sooner rather than later with the Attorney General. Let's not back into a corner here. Let's go right in and say, look, don't have us go down the road of reaching a position and then pull the rug out from us with a month left to get it ready for the ballot. Finally, if we go down that process with talking to the Attorney General, who on this commission should attend? It's important because we're each members of the commission, and I think the commission has to consider authorizing any contact with the Attorney General by anyone on this mode, and having the commission do that is important. Last concluding thoughts. It came up as a question why, during the election, why did our prior commission, which had 3 lawyers on it,
No, more.
four, I guess, yeah. Why did we hire a lawyer to work for the commission? In fact, the statute requires that when you submit your preliminary report to the 3 state officials, you have to have an opinion of qualified New Hampshire bar member that your proposal is consistent with New Hampshire laws and the Constitution. We hired last time Attorney Crean to handle that responsibility. His opinion at the time of the preliminary report was that our proposal, including the treatment of treasurer and secretary appointment, was in fact consistent with. It was a surprise, in other words, to all of us when we got that question raised by the Secretary of State and by the Attorney General. So in this time, I just alert, the chair has been doing incredible work to set up a budget with some staff. I honestly think that the statute will require us to engage an attorney again. And it may be something, because of some of these issues, that we think of doing sooner rather than later. And it's not because I'm worried about not doing the work myself. It's because the statute requires it. And, or, you know, and I say for the other attorneys on the commission, same thing. Finally, just remember as we go through our issues, 2 things I came across today as I was preparing my final thoughts. One is RSA 49B, which we worked on as our model, was substantially amended in key parts in 2014. So Clint, Betty, we worked off of 49B in 2010. It's been changed a little bit. We just have to keep that in mind. My first glances will be fine. And in fact, I think we have the power to stay with our charter as it is. And I've heard a number of lawyers, including today, say that they thought that the local change process that we adopted was the best in the state. So they're very happy with it. But I just know things have changed. One other thing happened. In 2019, the city of Manchester saw the glow of Concord, and this is fact. I talked to Senator D'Alessandro today, and he said, we wanted to try and move towards Concord's structure. They got a law passed that was very similar to the law that passed in 2010. Their situation was unbelievably different. The legislators who got that law passed didn't know that, because the difference was the Manchester School District doesn't have a separate charter, didn't have one in the law, and there was nothing there to become a foothold for the new one. And so I'll tell you that they went through a mess in Manchester with the Attorney General and with, most importantly, the Secretary of State, who took some real tough positions with the city. And the mayor and board of aldermen tried to, as I understand it, address it, but ultimately they couldn't get the ball over the end line. And so we do have some other things that the Attorney General and the Secretary of State have looked at that's not completely different from our situation, even though I think fundamentally there are differences, but it's something to consider. Maybe there's we would say that if the nest were not buzzing, we might go forward, but maybe one consideration, if we've got a buzzing hornet's nest, we may not want to poke it too much. At any rate, I would say thank you for letting me present to you on this issue. I think it's an important one for consideration from the charter. And you heard Clerk Phillips talked about he preferred the traditional charter appointment process as opposed to election. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Don't go away. Stay right there. Okay. Kate?
I have in my head my own ideas of why this may be, but why?
Okay, grab that microphone.
Sorry, what would the argument be on why it's preferred to have the school board appoint the treasurer and the clerk as opposed to the voters electing?
I can try it first, and then I'd love to hear others. At the last...
Bill, I am the treasurer,
Yes,
so I can tell you.
you do it. You
Okay.
answer.
When we had the charter, we had to follow this procedure. And we have a business administrator that's very professional.
Right.
The thought of hiring a stranger to do actually the treasurer's aspect of the Concord schools was just really worrisome, because you're elected for 3 years, and I'm just finished being elected, and our new treasurer is sitting right there. And what our goal is, as my goal as a treasurer, that I make $300 a year, is to sign, when they go to bonding, they need a treasurer to sign it, and that's just about it. I do nothing else. And I say that my goal is to do no harm. But that doesn't mean some treasurer might not be elected that could do some harm. And it just doesn't fit our model.
Right, and I don't disagree with any of that, and I think, I lean, or tend to agree with that, but, I mean, isn't it possible you would get a wacky school board who would appoint? I think the thought is you would have consistency with a treasurer and clerk if the board appoints them, but isn't there a risk that if you had sort of a different school board, you've got right now 9 people making the decision as opposed to the voters making a bigger pool of people making the decision as to who should be. That would be the risk I would see, I guess.
And then that is a risk, but I think that, being on the school board as long as I was, the goal for the central office is to make it as functional and able to know all of the aspects of what has to happen with a school budget, living within the parameters of the legal system. And so we kind of, the main job of the school board is to hire a good superintendent. And then the superintendent hires all the people below them. Now, the school board hasn't taken on that role at all. I on the school board says, I want to elect a new treasurer. It's just not, our goal is to elect a superintendent. That's it, as far as personnel goes. We could set policy, but this is how our system works, and it works well. I can't see it adjusting it to that extreme and make it ineffective.
And if Madam Chair, I know that we have another person tonight.
No, we're okay.
Is here to present. Okay.
Yeah,
great.
no, we're okay. I'm watching the clock.
All right, very
It's
good.
going to be a balancing act.
Sorry.
But we're going to go as far as we can, as long as we can, within our time limits. Is it fair to say then that last time, and you're going to get sick of me saying last time, but last time you had to pick your issues, and the more important issue was the 2 questions that were answered favorably. And at that point, I know there was work done around the treasurer issue, but if ever we're going to take a stand and make a point, it's now, isn't it?
Starting with the debate that Kate just led with, which is what is the right answer. I agree with that. But I think this is an easier time because we don't have that overwhelming issue, the top goal that everyone agreed on.
No, we're in a better position, right. I guess I would, go ahead, Bill.
But it just feels to me that unless we want to make a decision now as to whether we actually want to go forward with this, the smart approach at this point is to at least prepare the argument that we would present to the Attorney General as soon as possible. And then this commission can decide whether, in fact, they want to go forward with that proposal, as opposed to, I suppose, amending RSA 671-6 to say, except as provided under 6A and for the Concord School District. But getting it through the legislature is probably a longer process. In other words, the legislature could accept the Concord School District out of this, I assume, right?
In fact, an effort was made in a very rushed way when we learned that there was a problem the last time to get an amendment at the last minute on a couple bills. It was unsuccessful. The one amendment that did come in was that or successor to, there too, that covered the ability to hold elections in accordance with the traditions. But that you're right, that something like that could happen. I would say that it is hard in this legislative cycle. There's so much divisiveness that you can get lost very easily from a simple issue of local control.
Well, I think going further at this point from your PowerPoint to actually thinking about what this argument would be to the AG's
Yes.
office, would at least give this commission the ability to say, when we analyzed it even further, and we may not have to analyze it any further, Bill, from what you've done, that, okay, we think this is a solid argument, and we can weigh the pros and cons of making that argument to the Attorney General's office now.
Well, I know I would be very happy to work on that exercise. This is something I think is important for the reasons that Clint raised. I could see bond issues being held up, by a single strange election, and I think that's a concern. Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
This may not even make sense, but we've spent a lot of time talking about the treasurer and less about the clerk. And are they coupled? I mean, is there any advantage, any reason to talk about only one or the other being elected? Do you know what I'm asking?
I think that it's open for any configuration.
I
I
guess-
think that in general, I believe that the City of Concord School District is uniquely positioned to examine its governance rules and propose the ones that it thinks is best. If the Concord voters approve it, that's their local right, I think, under state law. So you don't have to do both. You could do one elected, one not. Whatever the commission thinks is what I think we're able to propose.
I'm going to make a recommendation to the commission. I don't think we need a vote on it, but I think just a sense of the commission as to whether we should pursue this issue further and come back at another meeting,
Yes.
probably in January.
Yeah, I think we need to hear from the Attorney General,
Yeah.
because if they say, no, it's a non-starter, don't even go there, then we don't need to spend hours talking about it.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we have the meeting with the Attorney General now. I'm suggesting that we analyze further the question of what our strongest argument with the Attorney General on this issue should be. They've already given an opinion. They haven't given an opinion. They've written a letter.
Right.
Which they will go back to.
Yes.
So the question is, what's our best argument against that? And come back to this commission. And I'm happy to work on it with Bill, or others can, and come up with the argument that we would make and give a sense of, this is our view of what the success rate of this argument would be. There's no sense in spending the time to go to the AG's office
Without being prepared for it.
So what I hear you saying is the statement of the argumentation would be prepared, then it would come back here for our review, and then further action. Well, it sounds like a plan. Is there
And I'd be happy to take the laboring order or in staff, a former official in the Attorney General's office. I'll be your staff guy.
Former assistant attorney general.
Yeah.
Official in the office.
So let's be clear, who is going to be working on that? You are.
I'd be happy to.
And I'll work on it with Bill.
That's great.
Do we have any other?
I'm happy to be if you want me to.
Sure. Very good.
Yeah.
And we'll come back to the commission at
Makes
the
sense.
next meeting.
Okay. All righty.
Thank you.
Well, do we give you a round of applause for modeling how this goes?
We let Mr. Schweiker get up there. I went
Thank
too
you.
long.
That was great.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bill. This was a naughty issue, spelled K-N-O-T-T-Y. And it was one that really needed to be revealed, and I think your point of preparing ahead of time makes so much sense, rather than get caught in the crunch of time as we move into the spring and summer when we have these other deadlines. Okay, according to my agenda, we're going to welcome up here Mr. Schweiker. Are you, do you want to come up? Yeah. Okay, and sir, I'm going to remind you that we have time constraints, okay?
Yes.
Okay, no, and I'm not trying to be mean about this, but we have two other big issues to manage tonight. So let's agree on 15 minutes. And would you like to reiterate what you've already sent to us, or would you?
I just briefly want to make a few comments in the beginning, and that is, I think, before you had to issue a single charter document, because it was very important to replace it, and then there were a couple of alternatives. And I'm thinking more in terms of this time, you have several things that are independent of each other that the voters can vote up or down on. Instead of putting together a package, you got to vote all or
You
none.
want to know?
Can you state your name?
Oh, I'm Roy Schweiker.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, anyway, so I'm not proposing that we need to, the Charter Commission agrees all these have to be done. I think that what I'd like to see is them put as alternates on the ballot and let the voters decide which of them should be done and which of them should not be done. So, Mr. Ardinger, I think, has fully explained in great depth the process that he would do as far as the clerk and the treasurer. I would like to simplify it substantially and just say that, change the charter to read that the Board of Education, I'm going to call them the school board, but when you write it out legally, it's got to be the Board of Education. Anyway, the school board shall determine how the treasurer and clerk will be selected. Of course, they have to do it in accordance with state law, but instead of every 10 years trying to rush things through, give the school board time to work it. And that's not to say that if this group gets together and talks to the Attorney General, that the school board may not do it immediately, but I would say make it more general in the charter revision, that the school board can determine how to do it, knowing that they have to conform whatever the law is. And as far as being elected by the school board, I almost think that it should be more like what the city of Concord does, and that is these people are staff employees. They don't elect them. They serve, until they retire or get booted out. And I think that probably that might be the correct thing for the school board, is the treasurer might be one and the same person as the business administrator. I mean, isn't that really what they are? And, I don't know who the clerk might be, but, and then you would automatically have, deputies, like if, an official in the superintendent's office is out, then, someone is authorized to do it. I would say the same sort of a thing. Let them each have, designated assistants. So anyway, I want to really simplify that. The next item is, there was a lot of discussion, in the candidates meetings about, how many members the board should have, where they should be elected from, all that kind of stuff. I do wish to strongly disagree with the suggestion that was made by Mr. Washburn that we only have elections during the federal elections because more people don't have them during federal elections because people are confused then. The school board should only be elected during the off years, which is what the statute might say. I think that's wrong. I like the idea of the board turning over every year. So if something comes up, you've got, an immediate response, not replacing everybody, replacing some people. I think that every year is a good thing. And the particular disadvantage of voting during the state elections instead of the federal elections is a much lower turnout. Only like 10% of people show up during the state elections, where it's more like 50% or more during the federal elections. So the special interest groups tend to control the years that are state elections. So I would like to stick with the idea of having some percentage of the members, like a third, elected every year. And one of the concerns was the attendance areas. So I've come up with a couple of schemes on that. The first scheme is I ran both a analysis and a Monte Carlo simulation, and it seems right now there's like an 18% chance that one of the elementary school attendance areas will not have a school board member residing in that district. If you went to 3 members from each ward area, that would go down to like 7%. So that's not perfect, but it's different. So anyway, I wrote up a proposal here to increase the size of the board to 12, so there'd be 3 from each of the districts. Now there's other things you can do, and I went to one of the city redistricting meetings, and they have these giant maps of where the things are, and it would be possible for someone to go to the city and say, we should rejigger the wards a little bit so they agree more closely with the way that the attendance areas are. And I suggested they could give some of these maps to Mrs. Hoadley to look at, but I gather they haven't bothered to do that. So anyway, there's just one proposal to do this, is to do that. Now the interesting thing is you can try as hard as you want to make sure that a person lives in each of the attendance areas, but that doesn't prove they have kids in that school. They may have kids in high school, they may not have kids in school at all. They may be divorced and their kids attend a school with their spouse in a different attendance district. So regardless of making them reside in each district, there's no way to prove they have kids in that school, because I don't think the Federal Department of Justice would like it if you made a requirement of the school board member, you've got to have a kid in school. So even if you could guarantee someone lived in the district, that doesn't prove they have a kid in that school, that they care about it. So that's my next item here, is the school board has the authority to appoint non-voting representatives to represent any group or area that they feel needs better representation on the board. And I don't know if we need to put that in the charter. Maybe they have that authority already. They're appointed 2 high school kids. But anyway, that's my idea of one possible solution for that. Now the next thing is something that I don't really feel strongly about, but it struck me, is right now apparently you can run from any of the 3 districts. You don't have to live in it.
That's not true.
I read the charter, and it only seems to say that you have to live in the Concord School District and not in the individual voting district.
Well, I will say that when Jenny Patterson moved, she resigned from her
She had to.
ward, her
Yeah.
district seat.
Well, I won't say that she
And
can't.
I haven't read the charter in that regard, but I believe that there might be a policy, a school board policy, where if you move out of your district, you must,
Well, I
when you
mean,
were voted on that term, you must
okay.
resign.
You see, once again, I'm not saying that people haven't done that in the past. I'm merely saying my reading of the charter is that that is not a requirement. So I'm suggesting that could be put in the charter if anyone thinks that's important. And I don't know if you think it's important or not. Like I say, you people are on the Charter Commission, I'm not. But, you just got these ideas to think about, and like I say, you can vote them individually in the election. They don't have to all be together. Okay, next one is, if you're using pre-qualified bidders, you've got to have at least 4 pre-qualified bidders. I mean, this, I think, is based on poor governance of the school board in the past. When they built the 3 elementary schools, they only allowed 2 organizations to bid. And that's, to my mind, very poor judgment, because when you're pre-qualifying bidders, it has to do with their financial capacity, their leadership, and whatnot. Let's say right before the bids are open, there's a car crash and several of the high-ranking officials of one of the bidders are killed. So they're no longer with them. Is this going to affect whether you want them to be the winners? Let's say one of them, right before our bid is opened, gets a big contract somewhere else, so that people are going to be tied up doing something else. So really you only have 1 bidder and not 2 in these circumstances. And once again, why is something like this in the charter? The reason it might be in the charter is the school board in the past has done something silly about this, and this is your chance to keep it from happening again. And now the next one has to do with the city, some stupid stunt they pulled. They voted redlining downtown. Poor people aren't to be allowed to live downtown. It's in the deed for the DES building that those apartments are never to accept anything but fully paid tenants. They can't take Section 8 or whatever. And they accepted a lower cash price in order to put that in the documents. And I think if the public had known about this, there's no way that ever would have passed. But it did. So anyway, this just says if you're going to, put conditions in a negotiated thing, that you need to let the public know in advance what those conditions are so they can rant and rave about it.
The only thing I'd remind you of, you have to understand that the list of topics that we have for discussion have come from a variety of places. And it's been an interesting collection. There are some of them that I can look at and just say, this will never fly because. And so we're going to have to sift through that. All of these topics will be discussed, and the ultimate judgment will be revealed, and it'll be revealed right here on television. So, but I would have to add that those things that are not germane to the Concord School District will clearly not have much discussion, because if it's a matter that's totally irrelevant and it's not our ballgame, then we won't be touching it.
Well, what I'm going to tell you is it's not totally irrelevant, because the school district has in the past disposed of former schools, and they should do the same process I'm suggesting, and that is, if they're going to accept anything other than the high bid, the public needs to know in advance what the rating factors or whatever are, so they can object to them or not as they please.
Okay, I don't have your list in front of me. Is that item right there on your list that you
Yes.
sent to me on Saturday?
They're all on this list.
Okay, that's all I need to know. And as I just assured you, that everything that has been sent to us will be a topic for discussion, and it'll have a fair hearing here.
Okay, actually that's out of order. That's disposal of real estate. The previous one is notification of contracts. And this has to do with, there's been some people that apparently feel like the school board needs some more oversight, and there should be extra votes and everything on the budgets and so forth, and people were mad that they couldn't see the superintendent's contract in advance. And my feeling is that we should not have to have a public vote on this stuff, and you don't even have to have a public hearing on it. But I think it's fair to put stuff that the school board is going to be voting on out in advance, so you can call your school board members if you don't like something. And so that's essentially what this says. You don't have to have a public hearing on the superintendent's contract, but you've got to publish in advance what it is, so before the school board votes on it, they get to know what it is, and they get to find out whether people like it or don't like it. And once again, I'm not suggesting we put all of these in take it or leave it package. I'd like to see these voted on relatively individually, and let people decide which of them are important and the better governance. Okay, I'm going to take another one out of order because it's quick. The current charter says that there will be another charter commission in 2021. Well, guess what? It's 2021 and you have one. And so my question is, do you want to amend or add that there will be a charter commission in 2031? Make one every 10 years or not? And I'm not going to take a stand on that. I'm merely pointing it out, just like that thing with the school board members not being selected by districts. And then, once again, I'll take the last one next. Here's a real kettle of worms. I don't know, you people all, had to conform with the financial reporting for the Charter Commission. It's utterly ridiculous. I tried to find out from the clerk whether the deadline then was the deadline for the date you got the stuff or the date you filed the report. They couldn't tell me because it's not specified. So, as for instance, if I go in, I have to go into the office before 5 o'clock to turn in a report, and somebody gives me $5 in the evening, now I'm no longer complying with it if it's not the date the report's filed, but the date the thing is turned in. I think you can spend a lot of money and never report it. If you have an adult other than yourself, can go out and spend all they want on your behalf. It can even be your spouse, I think, and it never has to be reported. And if you don't pay the money in advance, but you buy something on credit, you can wait until a week after the election and then go pay them. And because that's after the last reporting date, you never have to report you got money from somebody. So I think this whole thing is completely unworkable. And
I understood your concerns from what you gave us.
once again, it's a matter of whether you want to open up this can of worms, or once again, I've suggested let the school board decide how to do it, and then they can work it out, because you've got a lot of stuff to do and it's got to be done quick. But clearly, the present situation is unworkable. And the last one we have here is the tax instrument financing districts, which is my pet peeve, and that is that the city essentially can decree a certain part of the city, and all the taxes in that part of the city go only to that district in perpetuity. They don't go for schools, they don't go for the counties, they don't even go for other city expenses. They can just spend them in the district. And there's a big one that was up where the Grapponi Conference Center is. That was supposed to have expired because they paid off the bonds. Well, no, they went out and bought more stuff outside the district, but they expanded the district to include it. So you may never get your tax dollars from that. And it's the same thing downtown. The downtown district was to redevelop the Sears block. That's not only been redeveloped once, they redeveloped it again as the Hotel Concord. But the city is still keeping that money. And Alan Hirschlag is mad about the one up in Pennacook. That's the Merrimack Valley School District, so it's not directly yours. But anyway, the issue with the downtown one now is they accepted a low bid on the property to have a more expensive building built on it. But the point is, you'll never see that money because they're going to keep it and spend it downtown. The problem you have is that that building is going to have 64 apartments, and some of those people are probably going to have kids that go to schools, so you're going to have additional expenses due to that district, but you're not going to get any revenue from it probably for 100 years or more. And the interesting thing is, within a tax increment financing district, if the city has expenses from that district, they're paid by the district and not out of the city's general fund. Like the one up in Pennacook, the maintenance of the roundabout is going to be paid for by the district, because since the money from the district doesn't go to the city doesn't want to have to pay for it, so they're going to take it out of the district. But that doesn't go yet for school expenses. So,
Mr. Schweiger, I think you brought an issue to our attention, the TIF. There are some people here who know a little bit about it, some who know a lot about it, and I guess I'd have to say, as a taxpayer, that I do appreciate the fact that you've thought about the Concord School District and how it has not had that shared in that revenue and yet may have students from it. So that sort of thing will be examined and will be discussed, I'm sure, when we come to the topic about TIF.
okay.
Okay?
I just want to say two more minor things about it.
I'm counting 2.
Okay. Number one, I asked the superintendent, because you could address things to the school board and the district through the superintendent, if they had a number for what the additional cost of an additional student might be. And I have not gotten an answer to that. I think if the same request came from Betty Hoadley, maybe they'd be more likely to get an answer as to what the additional cost of a student is. And one of the reasons this is important is there's people on the city council who say the additional cost of more students is 0. You just stick one kid in each class, they're not all going to be in the same class, you just take a few more supplies out of the closet. So in fact, there's no additional expense by building 64 apartments. And so I think that that's, the one issue that if you could get a number from the district as to what that might be. I mean, it's not the full cost because some of it's reimbursed by the state and federal government, but I don't have the number, and so I can't do it.
Mr. Swiker, it's right on the webpage for the state. It tells you the cost per student. Last time I looked, it was about $19,000 per student.
Well, yes, but the point being, that's the total amount, and then some of that's reimbursed, so it's not fair for the district to ask the city to reimburse them for money they're getting from the state or the federal government. The other thing being that if we know where this building is, it's in a particular part of the city, and for instance, the elementary schools may come with different costs per student. I don't know the answer to that. And one question might be, if an elementary school is going to need an addition when you add more people, it might cost $10 million. So, that's why I thought, anyway, what I'm asking merely to do is the district has got to respond to the announcement of the TIF district with a cost estimate and present it at a school public hearing so that the people in the city have an idea of knowing about this. And the answer is,
I'm going to interrupt you here. We're not going to get involved in this squabble. There are so many variables in this point that you're suggesting, and I think it's just not a good use of our time. And you said you had a second item, and we'll hear
Well,
that.
I'm talking about the second item.
All right, go ahead.
The second item is, my suggestion is that you require the school district to respond to this by holding their own cost analysis in their own public hearing, and that the school district does not respond to the city until after the public hearing, so they can hear what people in the school district have to say.
Okay, thank you.
And I know that this has no effect right now, but what I am hoping is that if this passes by a very substantial margin, as in people are upset about this, number one, the city council may wise up, and number two, there is a procedure to amend the city charter by petition. And if this really gets a good number of votes from the people in the school charter, you might find out that this could pass a, city charter revision. So there's my two things.
Yes,
That's
it
my
is.
last topic, and I'm done.
Thank you.
Okay. I've tried to be very fair and open with you, and we've had a nice email exchange, and I'm glad you came tonight and raised questions, some of which there may be difficult answers, but I assure you that the topics that we do ponder and discuss will be fair, they'll be relevant, and they'll be doable. And so, come back again or email us as you did before. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd just like to say,
Oh, I need to say one additional thing that's not on this list.
That's a half. Go ahead.
Okay, I think Mr. Ardinger is correct. Random people can't talk to the Attorney General, so you need to designate somebody. I think he sounds like an ideal person to do that. And
With the others.
so I'd just like to thank Mr. Schweiker for putting his ideas and comments in writing
Yes.
before the meeting. It's very,
Yeah.
very helpful.
It was helpful, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you.
Now, is there someone else? Mr. Russell, welcome back.
Welcome. I have a low PowerPoint, one-page thing to pass around. I tried to send it in, and I now have the ability to do it.
Yeah, but I'm glad you brought it with you.
The one issue I want to talk about is a table I've laid out on increasing the size of the board. Manchester has 15 on their school board, 12 wards elect one member. There are 2 at large, and the mayor is an ex officio. Nashua only has 9. So I've laid out some possibilities there with the numbers. I think Mr. Schweiker spoke of it. I think last time I spoke about 2-year terms. I think I'm going to recant on that and say I think the 3 years is a great idea because you have 2/3 holding over. You always have some continuity. So to the extent I can withdraw that idea. Basically, I think the other issue that comes before it is looking at the at large. What is the number on at large? The issue with at large is about versus local districts. One issue to be considered on at large, if Free Staters or a conservative group came in and wanted to dump a lot of money into a school board election, that they could run a ticket district-wide. If everybody was elected at large, it would be more difficult to get people there. And then the issue that I've heard of each school district or people in each neighborhood should be there, should be on the board. Bill, you asked a question about uncontested and things like that, and I talked to Roger a little bit. I've done a lot of those numbers. I don't have them here. I do know the last 3 municipal elections has been an average of 460 voters per ward. And if you put the 3 wards together, then that's about 1,500 voters electing a person in a district. If you look at Manchester, it's 3 times the size of Concord. When they elect somebody in a district, they pretty much have the same numbers, about 1,500. Manchester's 120 and Concord's 40,000 or so. So the sizes are about the same. But anyway, so my first choice, I guess, if you can live with an even number, which then leads you to maybe a 6-6 tie would be 12, because you're electing one person per district every year and one person at large per year. The other numbers, as they get higher, I think my second choice would be the 13B, and then the 15B. I think I favor fewer at large for several reasons, but so I'll be back next time with some numbers on blanks. I'll be on how many uncontested races. One thing I have noticed, the city council, the city clerk has the results going back to 2011. You can go online and get those and print them out, and they do have, and I've looked, and obviously when it's uncontested, there's an awful lot of blanks. In the District B charter race where there was no competition, I think there were probably 40% blanks because there was no competition. But anyway, so that's all I have to say today.
Oh, we thank you very much, and we
I
thank
have a
you.
question on this.
Yeah,
Sure.
Please.
Go ahead.
How are we supposed to read this? What does the A, B, and C, what do A and B mean? So-
A, B, and C are how we elect people to the school board right now.
These are the
See,
districts.
The districts, up the top it says
understand
districts, and then beside it I've indicated which wards go in the districts.
that. I got that. What I'm trying to figure out is across the top. 11A, 11B, 12.
11 is the number that would be on the council. A is option A, option B, 13A, option A, 13B.
Okay.
Okay, so I've laid out, 6 or 7 options there, I guess. Any other questions?
No, that's very helpful.
Thank you.
Further questions?
Thanks, Charlie.
No?
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we may have to, well, I'm watching the clock and estimating time things. I guess at this point, it's time for commission housekeeping and announcements. That's not a very official sounding thing, but it does describe what we're doing. The first thing, please, would be the approval of the November 30th minutes, and I believe everyone has a copy of those. And am I correct that, Lyndon, that after there is an approval of those minutes, they will go up on the website beside the other ones that are already there?
Correct.
And while you're just thinking about this a little bit, I need to tell you, and you've probably noticed it, I hope, that we're trying to be as extremely accessible and put out a lot of information. And it's in a place where it's pretty obvious. If I can find stuff on the website, most people can. I'm not a real intelligentsia here. And so if you can go and you can look for the word minutes, and you can go and look under this calendar, and then the agenda for tonight's meeting came up as the agenda. So the things are there. The other thing that's happened is that I have given to the receptionist upstairs, who takes a lot of phone calls, I've given her 2 info numbers. One is that Charter Commission info, and then another one is CTV info, where people can inquire about the tapings, the video tapings. And so we're trying to make things as open and as available as possible, and we're encouraging people to come to any of the meetings we have. And so if sometimes it looks like we're on overkill, well, I'd rather be on overkill with being open and accessible than to being under the gun. And so with that little bit said, which I was going to say anyway, is there a motion to approve the minutes, or are there suggestions for changing them?
I'll move to accept the minutes.
Thank you very much. That's Clint. Is there a second for the approval? Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion? I guess not, if we're not going to change them. So I'll call for a vote. Those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? Are there any abstentions?
I would just abstain because I wasn't there. I did watch it.
Oh, well, that's understandable, and thank you for being so correct. Of course, I don't expect any less of you, especially because you come from Cornish. Okay, so we're done with the
Jenny,
approval.
can I say, the recorder does a wonderful job. The recorder does a wonderful job of going through what everyone said, but I think our minutes of this meeting should be far more condensed. That all we really need to do is to say, for example, with Mr. Schweiker made it very easy for us. Mr. Schweiker appeared and presented issues that he provided in writing. You can attach that to the minutes. Somebody else spoke and they covered 3 topics. If you want the excruciating details about what everybody said, you can watch it on television.
Yeah,
So I just
exactly.
feel like
Yeah.
for the
That's-
purpose of our
yeah.
recorder and for the purpose of these meetings, we
Yeah.
can cut it way down. What people really want to know is, in general, what did people say?
Yeah.
What did you vote on?
What'd you do? I sense that, and I agree with that, and Dawn, you're all set with that too? Because when Mr. Klein sends a courtesy copy back to you, you can see that certain things may not be necessary. So, we'll figure this out. You know what I feel like?
I can talk to Dawn about it, too. She did a wonderful job.
I know.
Getting all the details,
Right.
which then I
Yeah.
redlined the daylights out of. So,
But I do have to tell you, folks, I feel like we're flying in an airplane that we're still building, because there have been no rules for this sort of an organization. We don't have committees. There are lots of things that are quite different. And so I admire your patience with us as we work through these, getting over these little hurdles. And this is an example of it, if you will. Now, I think we've got time to look at that topics sheet, because I'll tell you, I did it and it's very rough. In fact, in one place I say, I don't understand this and I don't know where it came from. I mean, what could be more confessional than that? And so if you have,
Betty, what topic sheet are we talking about?
That was the email that I sent out.
it has 15 numbers on it. And all I would say is, why don't we give it 5 or 10 minutes? Because if you have topics that you want to approach earlier rather than later, then we'd like to know it. I took the liberty of sketching out the first 5. And if you don't want them there, that's fine. But it seems to me like there are some that need to be done sooner rather than later. For example, if we were to discuss the topic of the number of school board members, and the decision of this group were to be to remain at 9, then several of these others would have no reason for us to discuss them because they all are a different amount. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you look down through, and it's an email that was sent out on December 12th, and I do apologize for the proliferation of paper. I mean, I know it's a blizzard of paper, but between the pandemic and our other, we don't have those nice little computers that the school board had, and you could just go to those, so we're stuck with paper. And this happens to be a piece of paper that has 15 items on it, first of which says campaign financial disclosure requirement, and number 15 is the threshold for the charter. And I think that's going to be your little baby.
Can we get
Right.
a copy of this?
Excuse me?
Can someone, do we have any extra copies of it?
Do we have no, but you can take mine, I know it well enough. Yeah.
I'm trying to find Lyndon's. Lyndon, when did you send the email again?
The email was sent on Monday at 10:22 a.m. It's called Three Notes from Chairperson Betty Hoadley.
And
Oh,
it
yeah.
was an attachment, it was
It
within
was
the,
the,
email.
yeah,
Within
email
the
at the very
email.
end of the
Oh,
email.
Oh, you got it? Okay, I'll take it back.
it was from Lyndon forwarded Betty's.
Okay, Betty, but the email came from Betty. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right,
Yep.
yeah.
No, it
No,
came
it came
from
from
Linda.
Email
She
came
was
from me.
forwarding.
I'm gonna go see if I,
Betty
Let
sent
me-
Lyndon an email, Lyndon sent it out to
Do you want me to just forward it to you right
Well, I'm
now?
not finding.
I've got it. You want it?
That's right.
Well, I guess what I would ask you,
Right now.
it's probably too early for you to absorb that if you haven't had a chance to look at it. And so what I'm suggesting is that if people have a particular order of business here as we approach these topics, it would be really helpful to let us
You want me to
know.
push something?
Yeah.
Sorry, I
Bill, we'll get
Yeah, I'm having trouble. I know why your arm is up, but I didn't at first.
I broke it today, so.
Oh, no.
And poor Kate's trying to forward the list
Oh.
to Bill, but she can't push all the buttons with her hand up.
Did you get it?
And so,
I did just send it to you.
Not yet.
and so, I think at this point, rather than rush into something for which we're not totally prepared, that if you could just email to Lyndon or to me your analysis of these, if and just say, we really should look at this one in this order and so. And so at this point, we're going to, I think.
Betty, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Bill made such a wonderful presentation to start it out. And in that presentation was the word urgent. We got to do something right away. And then Bill said we're going to get together, Kate and Bill and what's his name?
Bono.
Wilbur, you can just call me Wilbur.
What does that entail, Bill? I mean, is that something that you think you can do before the next meeting?
Yes,
Or
sir.
it's Christmas time. so
We'll,
no.
we'll have it ready for an agenda item for next
I
meeting.
guess
And
Thank you,
Bill's got it
Lyndon.
ready already.
Yeah.
I think, I had a
Pretty
great
darn close.
discussion with council for Manchester today.
Sorry.
I basically got it written for me, so.
Yeah.
It's a good thing to start. I'll start.
Tracy, do you need one?
Betty, wouldn't
Just bring it.
Betty,
Yeah.
wouldn't
I
it
have
be
it
smart-
here.
One at a time.
Thank you.
would it be a good
Thank you,
idea
Lyndon.
to, just have each member go through these and say yay or nay of something that we think ought to be addressed and the order in which it ought to be addressed?
Yeah, that's fine.
For
Yeah.
example, we heard discussions from the district at the last meeting about their interest in maintaining the autonomy of the school district. I don't think anybody's raised that issue for our consideration. No member of the public has raised it. Now, any member of this commission could raise it, but if we're not going to raise it, I don't think that's an issue we should discuss, or at least if we do, it shouldn't be very high on our priority list.
Agreed.
So I'm just thinking, get back to you with, yes, this should be discussed, and have each member give a grouping of, some of these issues ought to be discussed.
That would be helpful.
And the only one thing about that, Bill, just a slight nudge, is we probably shouldn't be communicating substantive things. Because of the right to know law and things like that. The bottom line, though, is I think being prepared to kind of whip through it at this list, which looks pretty complete, at the next meeting, I think we'll be able to narrow this down, I bet, pretty quickly to issues that are on our table. This list is a great start of that. That's the only thing, Bill, if we send messages.
So one thing is for Betty to pick a set of issues for discussion at the next meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my suggestion would be, let's talk about the issues of composition of the board, compensation of the board,
Right.
the manner in which that
That's
board
what
is
we want to hear. Because I'm constantly, like I'm looking at the clock tonight, I'm constantly looking at the calendar.
Yeah.
The calendar says January 18th, February 1, and February 22. And then that gives us a little leeway in order to get the preparation of what's going into the prelim and also get settled in some fashion, the, what we heard tonight, the treasurer and clerk. And so it looks like we've got 3 solid meetings, but if we begin to have more people show up, then the promise to them has been you'll be first on the agenda.
Right.
So it has to be elastic. We have to try to get the more urgent ones in first and then finish it off as we go through. It would appear that we're okay time-wise, but this is a lot to do in a few meetings for a group that's already, well involved in other places and other times. So that would be very helpful to do that next time. And the sooner you get it to either Lyndon or me, then the sooner we'll have to.
I think Bill's suggestion is don't do it. Bill's suggestion is if we start providing a list to you of these things.
Yeah, it's potentially
Better, yeah.
outside of
Yeah.
the
Okay,
public
outside of
process.
what, okay, all right.
But I think we should get prepared to really cull some issues at the next meeting.
Yeah.
The one thing about it, as we go to the prelim, is I'd like to follow up with the commission about, should there be a person designated to consider engaging a qualified lawyer? I
Oh,
think
you read
having
my
that process
mind.
started now at the holiday time, it's gonna take a while to get that all set up and
This is dangerous, you read my mind, because I was gonna bring up next time to have a group of 3 or 4 people get together, examine the need for independent counsel to come forward with suggestions for that person and the compensation, so that we don't, so we have commission member involvement in that, because we expect that the only 2 real pieces of outside help will be what we have from Lyndon, the communications manager, and the strong possibility of an independent counsel review. Have I said that correctly?
yes.
And
I think we should start we should have anyone who wants to volunteer to look at, talking to folks about whether they would be willing to serve and be considered for engagement at a proper meeting of the commission. I think we should start that between now and the next meeting.
Yep.
Because we will run into trouble. Just for that media record, this is a legal requirement by the statute. It is not us asking for it. I mean, that's important.
I mean, unless other members of the commission object, I'm going to make a radical assumption, which is that the lawyers in the room probably
Yeah.
know who
Of course.
That's what I was thinking
Good.
was, it
And
really
could
makes.
we make
Maybe
that
the
a
three of us a second
give,
thing?
give the commission a couple of recommendations,
Great.
2 or 3 names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would
Thank
certainly
you,
be
Bill.
comfortable with that.
So we have, the
Two
little
jobs.
Legal Beagle group has 2 jobs.
Okay,
Can I make a suggestion at the next meeting, because I know that there's members of the public who are very interested in the school board makeup election cycle, that we put that out as the agenda item early to solicit public feedback, because that's been the biggest issue people
The
have spoken
Yeah,
to me
that's a
about.
good,
Right.
yeah,
idea.
very
Okay.
good idea.
and then, of course, we have something from Charlie Russell on that.
Yeah, and I know there's
Okay.
other people who are interested in coming to that meeting, but they have to get childcare, so they only
have to
want
know
to come
when
to
the
a
meeting
meeting
is.
that
Yeah.
is
Well,
specifically going to cover the topic.
We're working with an idea of trying to get the order of the topics out, but because it's so fluid, we never know. Well, I was hoping we might start tonight, but that's not gonna be possible. And nor will we know how far we go once we get started. So, yeah, we'll work on that as a challenge.
I agree with Tracy, but I think there's a horse that we got to put in front of the cart. And that's, before we get to considering any of these questions about the size of the school board and the manner in which the school board is elected, if people feel strongly that we should go away from the ward voting system, that's going to change our analysis
Oh,
of the
yeah.
second issue entirely.
I know,
So
and I
maybe
hate,
maybe the first question is, how does this commission feel about the question of whether we should have citywide or ward voting?
yeah, right, in order to,
Because if you take, for example, Mr. Schweiker's proposal or Charlie's proposal, I should say Mr. Russell's proposal, if I'm going
Yeah.
to say Mr. Schweiker, that changes if you're not going to have ward voting. So,
this is not gonna be easy. And we're never gonna satisfy everyone, but we need to make sure that we follow what we say we were, and that is to put forward, to examine the topics of interest that have been shown, and to come up with the commission view of it, have it go and get approved, and finally get it on the agenda, but it's on the ballot, but that's when, well, that in the last instance is when the public has a chance to weigh in on it. But we'd prefer that they weigh in much sooner, is that correct? Right, get people here.
Tracy, do you agree with that? Do you think that's?
Yeah, I mean, are you asking for, to people to go around the room and just?
No, I'm just saying, when we get, at some meeting, we're going to have to discuss this question of, are there members of this commission
Yeah,
who feel that they want to change in the manner in which school board members are elected, ward versus city? Because that issue, it feels to me like that issue has to be addressed first, before you can then, I mean, I suppose you could decide that you could address the question of, are school board members elected only in city council years and as non-state national elections first, but it may be that there's very little interest in this commission of going back to the prior method. It could be there's a great deal of interest in it. I don't know. I'm an agnostic on that at the moment.
I think that's the pressing issue. I know from what I've heard from people is, where do the school board members come from and how many are there? And I think that should be one of our first things to cover.
I agree.
Okay. At this point, so we've had a discussion of topics, not what I thought was going to occur, but what's very helpful, so thank you very much. At this point, we have on the agenda a time for a non-public hearing, and if I get a motion for us to go into that, I'll explain how that needs to work from a legal point of view. Sir?
I move that the Concord Charter Commission go into non-public session for the purposes indicated in the agenda to consider personnel, confidential personnel matters.
Okay, and I will add,
I'll second that motion.
thank you very much,
It requires a roll call vote.
a roll call vote, and you're the secretary. You have to go around and find out.
So,
Mr. Rose,
start over here. Eric?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
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 Yes,
we're in executive session.
all right.
And now, for that,
You better wait so I can leave.
yeah, I think we gotta
Yeah,
wait
no,
for
I'm
the
going to the-
media.
Well, you can tell this is the first time I've done this. Okay. So in a non-public session, under 91A3, Roman numeral 2, both A and B, this requires that we clear the room of those people who are not charter commission people, and it also requires that the videotaping stop. So we're going to take a 3 or 4 minute break for that to occur, and I'm happy that you folks are here, but you're lucky you're going to get out before we.
And just for Eileen's point, this is the last issue for this meeting.
Yes, it is.
Right.
Yes, you will
got it.
not miss anything. I wanted to tell you that before.
Since this isn't being taped, I'm gonna move these so that he can close up.
Great, thank you.